There is a silent engine running constantly in the background of your mind. You don't hear it, but you feel its exhaust, the steady, quiet hum of daily anxiety and dissatisfaction. We tend to blame our stress on outside forces, our jobs, our relationships, the state of the world. But the actual friction comes from an automatic internal habit, the compulsion to categorize and judge every single thing we experience. You look at a room, a conversation, or yourself in the mirror and instantly sort it into good or bad, success or failure. We assume this sorting helps us navigate life, yet this act of organizing the world is often what makes it unbearable. Observation is an intervention. To look at your life and apply a label to it is to actively participate in building your own stress. The ancient philosopher Lao Tzu understood this trap over 2.5 millennia ago. In the second chapter of the Daodejing, he makes a counterintuitive observation about how human beings perceive reality. He asserts that the exact moment a society defines something as beautiful, the concept of ugliness is born. When we see some things as good, other things instantly become bad. Think of it like minting a coin. You cannot create a head side without simultaneously creating a tail side. They arise together. When you label an experience as positive, you slice a unified reality into two conflicting halves. Labels act as wedges, fracturing our perception into endless pairs of opposing extremes. Their labels act as modifiers, shifting the intensity of the signals processed by your brain. If applying a single word can alter a neural response, consider the collective impact when an entire society spends hours every day rapidly sorting, ranking, and judging digital lives. A 2025 study in Frontiers in Psychology tracked how social networking sites interact with the mental health of young adults. They identified upward social comparison as a key mechanism, judging curated digital lives as superior to your own. The law of the coin applies. By labeling another's life as successful, you unavoidably mint the concept of failure for yourself. The study found that this comparison mechanism negatively mediates self-esteem. In short, exposure to these upward comparisons is a primary driver of depressive symptoms. Mass scrolling is a societal engine of comparison. By demanding that we rank every highlight we see, we mass produce our own feelings of inadequacy. From internal brain scans to external social data, the evidence points to a single diagnosis for our baseline anxiety. Chronic feelings of falling behind follow the logic of the coin. When we assign a rank to human experience, a deficit is created by the same hand that drew the comparison. The human mind operates like a factory. Because opposites arise together, our continuous pursuit of good judgments ensures the production of corresponding shadows of bad. We are trapped by our own architecture. The very categories we use to try and organize the world are the bars of the cage. This situation creates an incredibly claustrophobic problem. We usually solve problems by naming, by analyzing them and striving to fix them. But if the act of naming, judging, and striving is exactly what creates the problem, how do we escape it? We spend our lives in a state of chronic exhaustion, striving to grasp what we've labeled as good, beautiful, or successful. But what if that very effort, the human instinct to organize and label reality, is the mechanism creating our suffering? This was the diagnosis offered 25 centuries ago in the second chapter of the Daodejing. Lao Tzu observed that when we define one thing as beautiful, we simultaneously invent the concept of ugliness. Think of a boundary line drawn on a blank canvas. Creating an inside instantly calls an outside into being. In human judgment, these sides are inseparable. Defining success fundamentally invents failure. They must counterbalance to exist. We believe we are simply describing the world when we judge it. In reality, we are taking an active step to split our experience in half. This isn't just an abstract philosophical riddle. Naming our reality is a physical event that changes our biology. In 2007, researcher Matthew Lieberman conducted a study to see what happens when people put their emotional feelings into words, a process known as affect labeling. Participants were observed inside functional MRI scanners, allowing researchers to track the brain's activity in real time as they named the emotions they were experiencing. The moment an emotion was labeled, a specific region called the RVLPFC activated. This activation sends a signal that disrupts the amygdala, the part of the brain processing emotional reactivity. By naming the feeling, the brain alters its emotional response. The data suggests that naming an experience is never a neutral observation. It is a physical intervention that changes how we process our reality. Today, this mechanism has been scaled up into a global engine. Digital networks like Instagram are built entirely on the act of labeling and ranking. This environment fuels upward social comparison, the act of evaluating your own life against a target you perceive as superior. Research published in Frontiers in Psychology tracked what happens to young adults when they are constantly exposed to the curated, beautiful lives of others. The data shows a clear inverse correlation. As exposure to these idealized targets rises, the observer's global and physical self-esteem sharply drop. This measurable decline in self-worth leads directly to a higher presence of depressive symptoms. The data provides a modern map for Lao Tzu's warning. By staring at the beautiful online, we are actively manufacturing the experience of the ugly within ourselves. When we combine the ancient text, the fMRI scans, and the modern psychological data, a single thread emerges. Naming and comparing are not passive thoughts. They are physical events that interrupt our neural signaling and systematically erode our mental health. This is the paradox of the human condition. Our natural instinct to fix the world by judging it and categorizing it is the very engine creating our anxiety. If the act of naming the problem is part of the problem, what is left to do? Lao Tzu suggests an alternative, a way to act without striving and to move through the world without being trapped by its labels. If naming and judging the world creates a trap of our own making, escaping it requires an entirely different way of acting. In the second half of the Daodejing's second chapter, the text offers a precise response to a world locked in these cycles of opposites. It points us to exactly one figure, the sage. The sage moves through reality using a series of paradoxes. They act without striving, teach without lecturing, and create without claiming the result. This is the practice of wu wei, or non-action. If our constant judgment of good and bad manufactures its own shadow, wu wei is the choice to simply drop your fists and refuse to fight that shadow. Of course, to a modern mind trained to celebrate measurable results, this sounds risky. We are wired to think not striving is just another word for apathy or failure. This sets up an immediate tension. The idea of acting without forcing goes against every lesson we are taught about how success is achieved. To see if this ancient framework holds up, we can test it against modern cognitive psychology. Researchers studying high-stakes environments, like Beilock and Thomas Carr, have extensively documented a phenomenon known as choking under pressure. It provides a clear view of what happens when we try too hard. Choking occurs when an individual has already mastered a skill, but their conscious ego suddenly steps in to over-monitor the process. The moment the brain tries to forcibly control a fluid motion, the system crashes. Experts suddenly perform like novices. This failure state is essentially psychological friction. It is the literal self aggressively getting in its own way. Conscious striving and forcing outcomes are not the drivers of peak performance, but the primary obstacles to it. If choking is what happens when the ego tries to drive the car, the opposite is the flow state. First identified by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi and recently synthesized in a 2022 Frontiers Scoping Review, flow is defined as a state of deep absorption where action and awareness merge. The defining characteristic of this state is the complete loss of self-consciousness. The internal voice that worries about credit, failure, or perception goes silent. This corresponds to a specific physical change inside the brain. During flow, the default mode network, the area responsible for self-referential processing, is quieted down. With the ego's processing out of the way, the task-focused multiple demand system takes over, allowing for effortless focus. This is the biological reality of wu wei. You are acting at your absolute peak, but because the ego is powered down, there is no you left to claim the credit. In our daily lives, our minds will inevitably keep trying to categorize experience into piles of success and failure. That automatic judgment is a permanent feature of our hardware. But striving against reality and trying to force an outcome remains a choice. When you feel the anxious urge to control a situation or demand credit, recognize it as fighting a shadow. Step back, do the work, and let it go. As the closing lines of the chapter remind us, when the work is done, it is forgotten. That is why it lasts forever. Because you claim nothing, the work remains whole. Its merit can never be taken from you. But how do we maintain this centered state when the world aggressively demands we take a side? That is the focus of Chapter 3.